Hi guys, Nat again. So I'm just finishing off this section. So topic 7, part 3. I think we left off after we talked about the steps involved in the absorption of carbohydrates, where I turned myself into a potato. So I think we're up to talking about the small intestine. Okay, so let's kind of kick off there, hey? Okay, let's go to the next slide because we did this one. Okay, let's talk about the small intestine. Now, as you can see, the small intestine is the biggest or the major organ of digestion. And it's also the longest part. And you can see here that it has actually 3 divisions. So the duodenum, can you see there? How it connects to the stomach, and then you've got the jejunum, there we go, there, and then you've got the ileum, which then connects to the large intestine. Okay, so it has 3 parts. Now the small intestine is very important because all of the absorption happens there. Okay, most of the absorption happens there. And remember, the word absorption means that it's when you're moving a substance from where you put it or to from where it currently is into the blood supply. That is the definition of absorption. So let's have a look and see some features of the small intestine that make it awesome for its job. So it's got 3 features that increases its surface area massively. Now let's have a look at the first feature. The first feature is that the small intestine has these folds. Look at them, 1, 2, 3. See these big folds? Yeah? Now, the good thing about that is that it does increase the surface area, but the other good thing about it is that all of the stuff that's in the small intestine kind of goes around and around and around. So it kind of whizzes through. Have you been to Wet n Wild, where you are basically thrown in that funnel and you go around and around and around and around until you get right down to the bottom? Yeah, it's like that ride, okay? So that is what your food is doing as it's going through the small intestine. It's going around and around and around, making sure we're making contact with all of those cells that live in there, okay? Now, the small intestine, as you know, has smooth muscle. So not only do we whiz around as we go through, but the small intestine also contracts. Now look at what it does. See, it's not really contracting in order to move things along like peristalsis. It's actually contracting to mix things up, okay? So if you mix things up by using muscle contractions, it means that the food can hang around that area a little bit longer to make more contact with the cells in the small intestine. So stuff whizzes through, but it also goes back and forth in order to make sure we keep it there for a while. Right, and let's have a look and see what else it has. So let's go back a step for a second. So each of those folds, see, that's one fold. Those folds have their own folds, which are these things here. So big fold, little fold. Okay, now we're going to look at these little folds. I'm going to move myself out of the way. These little folds are called villi. Yeah, see? So you got the big fold and you got the little fold. Now, can you see here? You've got the epithelial cells. Cute. And then you've got lymphatic system, you've got blood in and you've got blood out. Okay, so you can label those in that image. Now, the third awesome feature of the small intestine, so you've got a big fold, then you've got a little fold, and then you've got the microfolds. So each one of these cells has its own little folds. So this is how we end up with a surface area of a tennis court. Yes, you got fold upon little fold and upon tiny fold. Okay, that's how we increase our surface area. We want to make sure that all the food comes into contact with this surface. And in here, in these little folds, these microvilli are the enzymes that the small intestine uses for chemical digestion. Okay, and if you see them in your textbook, they are called brush border enzymes. Okay, so how cool is the small intestine, hey? Super cool. Well suited for its job. All right, so the last thing we need to look at now is the digestion and absorption of lipids. So as I said before, let's have a look at the mouth. We eat hot chips, which is actually one of my favorite foods. And hot chips contain lots of fat and carbohydrates. So when I put the hot chip in my mouth, I'm going to break it up into little smaller pieces of the chip. And actually, there is an enzyme in the mouth that it starts breaking down that lipid molecules. So there's not much going on in the esophagus. So again, the esophagus, all it does is transports the food from A to B. In the stomach, we have another enzyme there that continues to work on these lipid molecules. And then now we get to the small intestine. Now, the small intestine is where most of the action happens with regards to lipid digestion and absorption. So, the bladder puts bile into the small intestine. Now, what does bile do? Well, bile turns the large lipid droplets into many, many smaller ones. So it breaks them up. Yeah, so it's kind of handy. Then we have the enzymes from the pancreas work on the little lipids, the small lipid droplets. So what you want to do is you want to increase the surface area of food because then the enzymes have more spaces to work on. That's the whole point. So the gallbladder delivers bile. We go from a large lipid droplet to a small lipid droplet, if I can get my words out. Then the bile and the small lipid droplets actually arrange themselves in little packets. Okay? And then that's how they enter the epithelial cells in the small intestine. Okay? Now, inside the epithelial cell, these little packets are then rearranged into things called chylomicrons. Now, I'm going to show you a picture of this in a minute, so don't worry too much. But as you can see, because lipids are hydrophilic, we have to kind of package them up in order to get them where we need them to go. All right, so it's not as easy as the other ones. Right, and then the chylomicrons enter the lymphatic capillaries. So there we go. So the lipids don't go straight into the blood. They go into the lymphatic system, right, which eventually ends up in your blood anyway. So this is a picture of what I'm sorry about it being blurry. It's the best I could do. So here we go. You've got the bile. So here you have a fat piece of lipid. You add biles to it and it breaks it up into smaller pieces of lipid. Then these two things kind of get together and form a packet. then these little packets go into the epithelial cell of the intestine, and then they get repackaged up again into these chylomicrons, and these are the ones that actually end up going into the lymphatic system. So with lipids, we need to kind of package them up in order to get them where we need them to go. All right, let me move myself out of the way. Let's talk about the large intestine. So the large intestine, its main job is to absorb some water, store what we're not using, we haven't broken down, and then to get rid of that stuff, okay? Now, the large intestine has its own cool features, all right? The first feature is that, look, there is this band here that is actually muscle. So what do you reckon that will do when it contracts? It kind of does these like pockets, okay? So it kind of makes little pockets, okay? So that's a cool feature. And the other feature is these little fatty pouches, which I don't know that they know why they're there. They're just there. Okay, it's just a thing, few little fun features of the large intestine. Right, so I've got a little activity for you to do here. Let me put myself out of the way. Yeah, put myself here. Right, the large intestine is divided into 5 sections. Okay, now let's have a look here. This is where we go in. So this is the small intestine. Okay. So let's have a look at all the sections of the large intestine. You have the cecum, ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon, and sigmoid colon. Okay, so there are 5 sections. Is that 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Correct. Yeah, so there are 5 parts. Okay. Now, here, the appendix is full. Here the appendix here, it sits there. It's just like a finger sticking out. The appendix is full of bacteria and white blood cells. So when you need your bacteria in your large intestine to be replenished, the bacteria that live in here go in here and recolonize. Yeah. Right, which leads me to bacteria that live in your gastrointestinal tract. What? There are so many bacteria. Over 1,000 different species live in your gastrointestinal tract. Now, we give them a home. So they live in us, but what's in it for them, hey? Well, what happens is that when we eat fiber, which we can't digest, which is in a lot of our food, these bacteria actually help us break it down a little bit, okay? And the bits that they break down for us, we can actually use, okay? So we actually absorb that and we can actually make ATP out of it. So they kind of give us energy from fiber that we can't digest. They do it for us. The downside to that is that when these little bacteria are trying to break down this fiber, they produce gas as a waste product. Okay? Now, that means that in a normal diet, you will produce some gas per day, but the more fiber that you eat, the more indigestible carbohydrates that you eat, the more gas you will make, okay? So, you know what they say about beans. Beans, a musical fruit. The more you eat, the more you toot, okay? So the more indigestible carbohydrates, the more gas will be produced by these bacteria that are trying to get some energy for us, okay? Because we have provided them a home. So they're going to do something in return. Right. And the bacteria that live in our gastrointestinal tract also make vitamins for us, okay? Because they can make vitamin B and vitamin K, which we actually put into our blood and we use. So we need to be friends with our bacteria in our gastrointestinal tract because we provide a home for them and they help us out in quite a few ways. I've got a video here that I want you to watch about bacteria in your gastrointestinal tract, so make sure you check that out. It's a pretty cool video. And that's it. Yay!